Good afternoon, everyone. It's myself, Mr. Bradchester. I don't know what I just decided to have an accent for some reason. I don't know what the hell is going on there. But that's how we're doing this show. I'm going to randomly have a random accent from somewhere, even though I can't speak English very well, even though it's my only language. I've got Mr. Sean Rice below me from Dice with Rice, and we have a recurring segment that's starting today. It's our one and only. So this is our... I should probably move some things that are randomly in the way here, but don't worry about that. That's nothing to see here. But we're going to do a recurring segment on deal with the meta. We're going to be using specific armies, and we're going to be going off each one of those armies and not taking anybody that's basically playing in the tops and trying to dealing with the tops, which is the whole thing. And I'd like to say that I came up with this, but I didn't. This is Sean's idea that I stole, but I did take him with me as I stole it. So basically I carjacked his car, but I was like, whoa. Would you still drive? Come on.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes you have a great idea and Bradchester just, takes over your whole life and suddenly here you are.
I was like, hey, you remember that idea you had? How about we do a recorded episode in a live episode every week? He's like, and I was like, good, I'm glad you're on board with this.
And here we are.
are.
So this is dealing with the meta, and this is about positivity. If you are tired of everyone being like, oh, the meta is so bad, we're not dealing with that here. There are no complaints. This is how you actually deal with it as a top player.
100%. Exactly. You got hot bratted. Well, let's look at the meta watch here. So one of the best parts about the fact of the meta being 50% 5 armies is you can really plan on facing those armies when you go to tournaments. And today we will be softballing it in for our first one because Sean did go, we're going to do how to deal with the meta. We're not going to do with the top 2 or 3 armies. What army would you like to go to? And he was like, how about number 5? So we're going to start with Thousand Sons, who are doing pretty well. But they do have some issues. Excuse me. Oh, hiccups like a 12-year-old. I love it. Playmakers like my solution is crying into my margarita. So, and one of the biggest things about this we really want to go into is that sometimes you have to focus your gameplay, your game style, what your opponent can do, and what you can do to counter those things. For instance, while Thousand Sons have a really nice win rate, they're in the sweet spot that GW wants everybody in, that 50 to 55. Well, it's 40 to 55, 45 to 55. But they do have a really terrible win rate right now against Eldari. And they've had some struggles against Custodes 9, basically the people right above them. You know what I mean? Which is why they're in that particular win rate. So let's just jump into it, man. Let's rock and roll this.
All right, let's do it.
Let's look at Magnus for just a second, because we are dealing with the Thousand Sons. Remember, everyone, Magnus did nothing wrong.
Nothing.
Also, if you modeled your model with the boob horns, you did it wrong. There's so much to do.
There's a lot going on with that model, and it does nothing wrong, even with the boob horns. All you boob horn excuse me, I can't talk either, apparently. Brad, you're infectious. All these boob horn lovers out there, you rock those.
You rock those boob horns 8 days a week. All right, how do we deal with? 1, preparation. 2, identify strengths and weaknesses. And that's a big thing on this is I want to go back to just say 1. And basically, 1 is everything. Yes. The more you prepare, the more comfortable you're going to be. I spend a lot of time before tournaments looking over everything that my army can do and the things it's going to be able to do into the tops, which is a big deal. And then I figure out, number 2, which is the strengths and weaknesses of the army, of my army, the weaknesses of my army, but also the strengths and weaknesses of the other armies that I'm going to be going into and try to basically figure out how I can exploit those. And I do that by making a plan. Figure out what you're going to do. Don't just go into these games blind. That's the biggest problem is that If you try to do the same thing over and over again, it doesn't work. Well, that's on you at that point in time. You have to make a plan for victory. You have to figure out, how am I going to win this game? Not just how I'm going to go for it and kill some shit. You got to figure out, how do I just, again, in the end, I just need to score more points. Huge deal. And then,
for
go ahead.
I was saying, and for everybody joining us now and watching later, this is a peek behind the curtain. This is not something we're just pushing out. This is something that top players like Brad and myself, Mr. Crawley, we all do this when we're looking at taking an army to a tournament. So this is not just out of left field.
100%. And the biggest thing is 5 is continually, and I want to give like a long, as usual. I can make any short story long. What I do, make adjustments. Don't make huge adjustments. Always try to solve for one variable. You have to basically put in some time on this. I see so many people overcorrecting. And what you don't want to do is make your army 5% better against Eldar and 25% worse against everything else, for instance. You know what I mean? You need to make real adjustments, small adjustments, practice it with it, and just keep churning it to get it to the best it's going to be. Because the thing is you don't want to make it better against one thing, like I just said, and then just basically go do worse into the tournament because you don't play that army at all. So let's talk about preparation. Learn your army. Effective combos. I cannot tell you enough. Thousand Sons is a repetition, know everything about the army. This is not something you just grab and just YOLO swaggins and get your best result. There is a lot of things that are moving around, from cabal points to your sorcerer, stuff like that. Why do I have that Warp Beast in there? Things of that nature. Let's go. You know what? Hit the preparation slide for us, Sean. He also made this PowerPoint. He's a swell guy.
That is true. So the most important thing to know with Thousand Sons in particular is Magnus is your linchpin piece. If you don't know what Magnus does, it's kind of hard to run the army. But there's also some niche combos that you need to tackle things like Eldar or GSC or even Custodes. Knowing that you can turn off 2 people's armor saves with Lord of Forbidden Lore. It's kind of hard to do that if you didn't even include Lord of Forbidden Lore in your list, or you don't know what it does. So part of preparation is, hey, I know that I have these combos. I've read through my codex. I didn't just skim it. I'm guilty of that at some points. Thousand Sons, you cannot skip the preparation.
You cannot skim Thousand Sons. It is a big deal. They have a couple mechanics that are basically broken, but you have to implement them and know exactly when, not even just what they do, but when. So that is a huge deal on this. And the thing is all these combos are a big deal. Doombolt, one of the biggest things about Doombolt currently, hey, remember that lone operative guy that was really annoying you? Well, I melted his face.
He's gone.
Yeah, you can target things that are untargetable with that because it's not a shooting attack. So you can get around things. There's a lot of shenanigans with this. For instance, I'm going to bounce to the bottom but go back again. So the crystal. Should I bounce right away? And the thing is the answer is maybe. But you have to constantly have a pros con sheet in your head. What happens if I use this? The threat of that is almost more important than the actual ability that it does, because your opponent consistently has to make sure that you're not getting behind them, that you're not getting there. And that's a huge, huge deal, especially going into the late game. So if you're going to use something like a crystal, you have to look at, what are the benefits for me doing this? And the benefits can't be, I'm going to pick up random unit. It has to be, this is going to affect the game in every turn and scoring from then on. Can I put such a hurt on my opponent when I did this that it makes it worthwhile that I don't have this anymore? Also, whatever I just teleported over is probably going to get killed. So I have to basically make it so that I'm crippling my opponent enough to use this. I see so many people just bounce right away, and then it doesn't really make a difference in the scoring of that, which is another big thing, which is also, am I looking to take out their one big piece with that, or go more to the Brad school? Can I kill every single scoring unit in my opponent's army with that, I would love to take out all of their trash, because we go into the middle part of building an effective list. How do I score secondaries? Who's scoring them? How am I holding an objective? What is my army identity, which is a huge deal. And your army identity has to be figured out. What are you trying to do? Because you're going to make a lot of changes as the meta changes and as you play more games. But about 1,500 points of your army is going to stay the same, and that is the army identity.
Yeah, and that's kind of where, these aren't, and the reason why we're showing them all at once is these are not mutually exclusive. You have to do all of this at the same time. Obviously, as Brad said, Unprolific Crystal is a huge part of your list and something you're going to have to really master how to use. But jumping down to the bottom, kind of like Brad did, knowing how the TO is going to rule Unprolific Crystal means, oh, are they saying I can't use it on turn one? Well, that might completely change how you practice your matchups, which is later on. So knowing how the TO is going to rule specifically for your army is just as important as learning your combos and building an effective list. Because you can build the best list in the world with the best combos, and the TO could just say, yeah, no, we don't think it works that way. So you have to do all of these on the same level. They have to be at the same pace and the same step.
100% on this. And it's such a big deal. It goes to the same with how's my event ruling interactions, but what is the terrain going to be at that event? So we need to know rulings on my specific interactions, or anything that could affect me, to be honest with you. And also, what kind of terrain are we playing? We playing player place terrain? Are we playing GW terrain? What are they using as the towering rule? What do they have as far as windows? Are they blocking all the way? Are they blocking first floor? You know what I mean? You need to know this so that you can prepare in your practice. How am I practicing for this event? I need to know exactly what I'm going to be in before I can get a effective practice. I see people all the time practice on whatever they have at the home, and then they go to the tournament and it's just wildly different because the terrain setups are completely different. They didn't ask about how they're ruling certain things, interactions. How indeed, Nurgle Matt, here we do go. Also, I still have objective markers from Matt, and I just haven't seen you in forever. So
sorry, Matt, you're never getting those back. Just like I got kidnapped and my PowerPoint got kidnapped. Sometimes Brad just shows up and takes all your stuff. That's just how it goes.
This is also true. I do have a golden die for you also. It's still sitting in my house. It's right behind me, actually. So let's talk about the identifying strength and weaknesses, because it's a really big deal. This army has some really big highs, but it has some pretty big lows, which is why you have to prepare. You have to prepare really well. So removing armor save, Twisted Fate is bonkers town. Like,
just nuts.
It is literally.
Oh my gosh.
And if you don't know what Twisted Fate is one of their abilities where they can just tell a unit that they can't take an armor save. Now, they can take an invuln save, but they just don't get an armor save. There's a ton of units that have great armor saves and no invuln, or a really bad invuln. And then you can shoot things that maybe have rerolls or pluses to wound or just a volume into that unit and just go, hey, I just gave you 27 AP 0 saves. Oh, you don't get one? Cool. Just take that damage. It's so big.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and we're talking about specifically how Thousand Suns matches up to the top dogs. So GSC, you're not particularly worried about this because GSC have worse saves. Eldar, if Eldar is stuck on their 5-up invuln, or in some cases, no save.
All their vehicles, basically?
Yeah, you can just tell those fire prisms that they don't exist anymore. And that's pretty good.
Yeah, and you can do it with anything. And it's a big deal. I'm going to go to the second one on the strengths. Attrition damage. I cannot stress how big of a deal this is and how many people just overlook this. Doing devastating wounds, just literal tick-attack damage builds up over the course of the game. It's that damage all in that's basically guaranteed that you can give somebody over the course of the game is huge.
Yeah, and here's the specific secret to it. You set a guy next to a Mutilith Vortex Beast, and suddenly you have a 36-inch ability that you roll a die, and even on a 1, you're going to deal them mortal wounds. On a 6, you're going to deal them a ton of mortal wounds. And the fact of the matter is, you can just sit back and do that.
Real quick on this, the Mutalix Vortex piece doubles the range of your powers. So basically, a bunch of these 18-inch powers go to 36, which is why you'll always see that weird-looking model in the army.
That's why it's shown up. It's shown up for this reason here, where suddenly you want to remove armor saves from something 36 inches away, or you want to plink away at them slowly. You have the option to do either.
And durability, and these guys are very durable in that. There's multiple ways to reroll saves. So,
yep.
Let's talk about the weaknesses. Rubrics move at the speed of smell. They are.
Oh man, this is such a big, the 40K is a game of movement, and unfortunately, Thousand Suns are lacking. You read that right. Rubrics move 5 inches.
Yeah. And the couple that they either have a lot of 24-inch or even less, because we're talking the Warp Flamers are probably my favorite thing in them. So that's even less as far as range. Yep. The bigger thing for me is Cabal points. The army has so many tricks, but they all revolve around having a number of Cabal points because they all cost. Also, we'll get into knowing your rotation of Cabal points, when to spend things, what order to spend them in. But when you lose units, you lose Cabal points, and it can become a big deal, especially when Twist of Fate costs, $1 million, it feels like.
Yeah, and that obviously stacks up. Suddenly you try to play, Warhammer's trading game. The more pieces you trade, the less effective Thousand Suns are. That's just the fact of the army.
I do love Mike comes in. No save on my Wraith Knight? It's tears. No one has any tears for Eldar right now, Mike. No one has any tears. So let's go into what we're going to be playing against. Who are the top dogs and why? So I heard that Eldar's doing all right. So
a little bit.
We're going to have to, and the thing is they make up 13% of the total player base right now. So it's huge. Genestealer Cult doing amazing. And I think they're actually getting more and more popular. It was more of a hobby lag thing than anything, because that's just an army that put out a lot. Custodes everywhere. Knights are always everywhere. No matter whether, it seems like Knights are still always around, whether they're good or not. When they're terrible, they're out there. When they're great, they're out there.
A fan favorite for sure on the Imperial Knights fronts. You will play against Imperial Knights in your tournaments virtually anywhere.
Yep. It's just, they're always going to be there. Now, the strengths of the top dogs are mobilities. Everybody has the ability to go places. Eldar, Genestealer, Knights, even the Custodes with different abilities to teleport, rapid ingress, things of that nature. They also have a once a game advance and charge, which you have to be ready for. So, and all of these have consistent high damage output. And the key there is also why they're one of the top dogs. Mobility for one, huge deal. Like the game is about movement. But also, all the top armies have consistent high damage. Not just high damage, but consistent high damage. Game in and game out. Rerolls, getting +1s, a lot of rerolls, to be honest, in all of these, is what makes them just consistent, where they always put out that damage. And all of them have some form of resilience. Either great armor saves, great toughness, the ability to just get the hell back out of the way, Eldar, and some really high resilient units. So that's a big deal. Now, the bigger thing is that we know what their strengths are, and people get all like teary-eyed and sad about it. Well, we have to start looking into, why are other armies winning against them? What are their weaknesses? For instance, GSC and Eldar, both very fragile armies. You can pick up their armies. Also, in the case of Eldar, which is why GSC has a good win rate against them, is you can just nickel and dime Eldar into not being that good anymore, because they have a critical mass of volume of fire with Bright Lances and Fire Prisms and the Wraith Cannons and stuff like that. You start taking things away from them, they have a really hard time dealing with the multiple units, the MSU strategy and things of that nature. So all of them could be, just put more trash into them. I'm kind of a big fan of that, that, Sean. What you should do? Yes. Roll a bucket of dice into everybody, and things will probably work out. So
perfectly fine.
Into Custodes, for instance. Custodes has a ton of trash shooting. They're the kings of hand to hand, but if your army's not made of tissue paper, their shots are an annoyance at best. So,
Yeah.
and then you've got armies that, which is one of my favorite ways to play against people. Weak secondary game. No, it is. I love it because
it is. It is.
It's just an army that maybe you didn't do hardly anything to. You could still win that game because you're scoring points and they're not. Hell, I had it in multiple games at ATC where people were putting my orcs in a blender, but I was still scoring because I'm scoring points and I'm killing their stuff that they didn't. Basically, they had options of, should I put a teleport homer down or should I kill something with my giant model, you know? So you have to really make people have bad choices all the time. All they're doing good is Space Marine propaganda. That might be the best thing did today, man. You just tried to kill me with that one. Oh, shit.
I need Brad for a few more of these, Michael. You need to keep him alive, please.
This is a big thing. This is one of my favorite slides in this. We're going to go to make a plan in just a second, but like understanding your opponent's weaknesses is a big deal. And if you have time, you have the ability, I recommend putting the top armies on the board, not just to play against, but like play with that army and start to understand what things they have difficulty with. What if a couple things get taken away? For instance, you're playing against the top. You're playing against Eldar, for instance. Take out their trash first. So I'm going to go down to make a plan. So, because you can do that, there's plenty of times for you to pick and choose what you're killing with Thousand Suns, because they have a lot of surgical strikes that they're going to want to do. So you really, really need to figure out, what is my best play against an army? Against Eldar, for instance. Can I take out all the fire prisms right away? Well, I'm going to probably try to do that. But more likely, because they're going to try to be hiding more, is I'm going to try to take out the trash right away. I'm going to make it so that they have to use real units to score that engage behind enemy lines. More importantly, I want them to put a real unit out there. Do you want to cleanse with a fire prism? You know, I want to make them make real decisions on that. Hit us up with the make a plan, Sean. I like this. Right. I like this this slide quite a bit.
So one of the things you absolutely need to evaluate when you're saying, hey, I'm playing, in this example, Thousand Suns. Am I going to lean into what makes Thousand Suns awesome and try to throw that into the top armies? Or am I going to say, hey, these top armies really attack my weaknesses, so I need to mitigate some of those? Some of our examples here are, do we want more Scarab Occult Terminators? This is something that I'm not seeing people try. And I have played plenty of Thousand Suns now, and I'm not saying it's necessarily right, but looking at, well, if Eldar is only going to be able to score with their trash units, can I just take more Terminators and start them off the board and just say, bring your trash out, I'm here to pick it up? Do I say, hey, I'm playing against only Knights in my local meta? Well, you know what's really good against Knights? Them not being able to shoot you. And turns out Thousand Suns have some sorcerers who can just make that a thing. If you don't know, you can attach a basic sorcerer to a rubric unit, and it now can't be shot unless they're inside 18. That's really convenient when they can just, for example, on weak terrain, Knights can just see you everywhere. But if they can't shoot you, it doesn't really matter that they can see you. Or you need to play against GSC all the time. Well, if you're taking more units like Zangor and Lightning Chaos Spawn, and you're just advancing them everywhere, it's going to be really hard for GSC to prioritize where they need to go, because are they going to drop their whole unit in just to kill 2 Chaos Spawn? I mean, that sounds terrible. So this is part of knowing in your faction, what do I need for these certain matchups? What am I going to be playing against in my local area or in this tournament in particular? And making a plan based on that in your preparation stage. The next thing is, hey, what are my key units? And this goes into preparation and knowing your combos. Magnus is pretty awesome against Custodes. If Custodes run into Magnus, they're like, oh, that guy is hard to take down, and he absolutely will make short work of all my Terminators. That is not what Custodes want to see. Rubrics. if your rubrics are making it so that with Warp Flamers are making it so that when GSE drops in, they have to be within 12 of you because you have moved up the board with your double move, that is not what GSE wants. GSE does not want to drop in and take 8d6 flamer shots. That is
with a real AP on it also.
With actual AP is the big part about that. We already talked about Terminators against Eldar and basic sorcerers plus a Vortex Beast against Imperial Knights. If you can't shoot me and I'm dropping Doom Bolts from downtown on you, eventually that knight's going to go down and I'm not going to have lost anything.
And it's a big thing to keep that Vortex Beast alive. Yeah, I don't care what its offensive stats say. That's one of the things when you get a key unit, a key buffing unit, a unit that's actually giving a force multiplier. I see people just try to peek out the Vortex Beast, and I want to...
Nope.
No, bad. Get hit with a spray bottle.
Vortex Beast has... nice and safe.
Yes, the Vortex Beast has no offensive stats. Accept that, move on with your life. Unless somebody's standing right in front of you, and you have to do something... Do not. No. Going
Bad.
From 36 inches to 18 inches feels pretty awful.
And so, that's part of, knowing what your units need to do. Knowing that your Vortex Beast needs to stay behind a wall. That guy, I don't care what his stats say. Offensive or defensive. I don't want him seen. I want to get the benefit from him by taking him in my list. I don't want to just, have him walk out and take a million shots and then, suddenly I'm left hanging in the wind like, oh, what do I do now? I can't even reach my opponent. I'm stuck here with 5-inch movements and no way to reach my opponent. Don't do that. Same thing. You need to be able to position your rubrics. You need to have identified your weakness to GSE, taken the flamers to address it, and then put your flamers where they need to go. And you need to know that when you're making this plan. It doesn't need to be, oh, my rubrics are suddenly in the back of my army. That's not really good. Now they're just kind of stuck there for the whole game.
Also, when you're looking to deep strike things, you have to proactively carve out spots, push out, give yourself places to go.
Yep.
You cannot let your opponent dictate where you can bring your models in. You have to kill wherever you need to go. You have to start a turn or two earlier, figuring out where you're going to carve out that spot that you need to start going. You don't want to put 10 Terminators in your backfield because that's the only deep strike spot you have for that. And sometimes you actually have to ask yourself that question of, is my opponent playing a super aggressive list? And maybe I'm going to put those on the table every time. Do they not have things that I want to threaten in their backfield? Or can I do that with other things, especially with my crystal, things of that nature, or a different unit? So it is a big deal on that. And it's game by game. And that's the thing that you have to start practicing. Because it does change. Your game plan, even though the same army's game plan will change per mission, per what you're playing into. And you have to put it on the table and at least ask those questions. And the thing is you don't have to play a million games. I love the fact that you put in be time efficient, because I can't tell you the amount of games I play that are just re-racks. Because once I've made the mistake, or my opponent's made the mistake, I don't want to play 4 more turns if there's a deployment mistake. I want to figure that out, identify it, talk with my opponent, everybody that's around, and go, what can we do to fix this so that I don't do that in the tournament? I don't care who wins the game in the basement. I want to win the game in the tournament. So that's the whole point of figuring it out, adjusting it. Does this change my plan? Should we have put more stuff on board? Should we put more stuff in reserve? Talk through that. Talk through your games, and it's not like fixing stuff on the go. It's identifying that, re-racking it, identifying, re-racking it, talking through. It's the same thing where you're talking about intent. Intent is not just fixing your turn after you screwed it up. Intent is talking with your opponent of what you're trying to do, making it possible, making sure that that's a real thing that happens in the game. If you practice sloppily, you're going to play sloppily in the tournament, and you're going to get things happen to you. So it's important that you play smart, play efficiently, re-rack, talk through exactly what you wanted to do in your practice.
Yeah, and that's part of it. So one of the unstated things here is you are practicing your intent while you're while you're actually practicing. It doesn't matter if you're in somebody's basement. You can practice, hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you help me with this? Make it comfortable, make it okay. And you were practicing not only your army on the table, you were practicing your communication with your opponent, which will make you a better player. Because as we say on here, you can ask your opponent, what do you think about me doing this? If you say my intent is to do this, and they go, well, if you do that, I'm just going to move 9 inches away, 6 inches away. You go, oh, and suddenly you're not standing in the middle of the tournament hall where you've flown there and you're losing because somebody said, okay, are you sure you want to do that? And you went, yeah, I'm pretty sure I want to do that. And then they move. If you communicate with your opponent ahead of time, you don't ever have to worry about
exactly.
that.
Or you didn't box out my rapid ingress. Now I can sit behind this piece of terrain.
Exactly.
And then also moves like that lose the game for you. All of a sudden you went, oh, I forgot to box out this prime real estate where 9 custodian guard just showed up. Well, crap, the game's kind of over. Do that in the basement. Do that in the guest room, wherever you're playing. You know what I mean? Figure that out and then re-rack it. Figure out exactly where you need to be, which also means that you're going to deploy your army. I can't tell you how much I deploy my army, not even playing. I go to TTS, I go to the game store, I go downstairs, put the army on the board. Figure out, well, okay, this is something I do constantly. I'll just draw 2 cards 5 times and go, okay, who has to score these things? Okay, what units have to be? Oh, am I deployed correctly for that? Especially with a lot of us still, I know we're a little ways into 10th, but how often did you put something that has the fly keyword behind a wall and went, oh crap, now I have to make the long way around? So
I'm guilty of that. That happened to me in one of our first games, and we just went, okay, yep, we're gonna redo this because now I just can't ever get it where I need it to go.
Yep, and it's a big deal to just play. I can't state enough to talk, not just in your practice, but in your actual tournament games. If you're playing in a tournament, it is up to you to communicate with your opponent. It doesn't matter what your intent is unless you had a conversation with your opponent about what you're trying to do, and you both have to get that social agreement on that. Okay, Sean, your unit can move this. Is there any way to make them move farther? Cool. If that unit moves 15, 18, 10, 2, whatever the hell it is we decided its max movement is, can you see me from here? Do we agree, yes or no? Cool. We do? Great. Let's move on with our lives. I want to be out of range of this assault. Cool. Can you move any farther? Just keep talking, asking the questions, getting that agreement with your opponent. Again, nobody cares what your intent is if your intent isn't possible. You know what I mean? So talk through that. What can I do? Where could I go? You know what I mean? Especially in your practice games. So it's a big deal because talking through things lets you make adjustments. Oh, I want everybody to know, this will probably get me immediately demonetized. Always remember, throat punch anybody that says you can't put certain models on the board. Just because somebody's list is the new it list, the one that won whatever, maybe that's not how you play. Maybe you're play more aggressive, maybe play more defensive, maybe you need more range, maybe you need more trickery, maybe you're the trash man and you need more junk on the board. But it's a big thing that you make your list your list. I guarantee right now, Sean and I can make a list of any army, and it's going to be very, very similar if we have a particular concept. But at the end, we're going to disagree on a few units because we play a different game. So, and especially the rule of cool always applies, man. If you just spend like 100 hours working on some unit, I don't give a shit if somebody tells you it's the worst unit in the world. Put it on the board, man. You just spent forever painting it. It'd be awesome. And that might actually give you the edge because you're playing with something people aren't familiar with. So I can't tell you enough. Just put models on the board. Don't be afraid. Don't let some talking head, like some midgety guy with no hair, tell you that you're not allowed to use a certain unit in your army or a certain type. Practice. Try out different techniques, different lists, literally different ways to play. Maybe you think a very aggressive way is the way that you'd like to play this list. You know what I mean? And when I say, I have to pull that back, aggressive. Being aggressive doesn't mean you're just putting shit in the open. That drives me crazy also.
Yeah, let's just throw everything out in the open is not how Warhammer is played. Well, unless there's a very specific army, for example, knights, who you're just kind of in the open.
Yeah.
And if you're not knights, don't do that.
It's a big thing in this because, just like you said on this, getting familiar and comfortable with your list is just going to give you advantages. Not being familiar with what your units do, what the combinations do, with your strats, with everything else, is going to make it so you're looking up rules and you're not confident with everything. So being super confident with your list and with what you're doing is a big deal, which means in your practice you have to be looking at what certain missions do, because I can't tell you enough the times when I see people getting super aggressive, and I'll give two different missions. For instance, Purge the Foe, where it's a wildly different game than a normal game, because you're getting kill one, kill more, take one, kill more. Or sorry, take one, to hold more. And you can't get super ahead. Somebody holds more objectives than you. Cool. They got 4 extra points. So you can come back from that. If you're constantly nickel and diming the GSC player, but he's holding 3 of the 5 objectives. Okay, well, he's getting 4 more points than you. You know what I mean? There's no reason to sacrifice your whole army. Same thing on, for instance, a priority targets. You're sitting on 2 and they're sitting on 3. Congratulations, you're both getting 10 points. You don't have to go out and steal that objective back. So it's important to know what the missions are, because it changes how you play against armies because of that, because you don't need to do things. I can't tell you how often I see somebody like just sacrificing 20-30% of their army because they have to take back that 3rd objective on priority or purge, and you're like, I mean, no, you don't even do any of that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, all of this is cumulative. You get to this point where you're finally making adjustments and you're finding out, hey, on mission X, this unit isn't great. Against this army, I need to do specifically this thing. And once you have that familiarity with your own list and you are comfortable with what's going on and why you've chosen these units, then you are going to find success. I cannot tell you how often I've taken an army that I'm just like, yeah, this isn't the best army, but I'm still going to win with it because I know exactly what I want to do at each juncture, and my opponent may not know that. And if you're someone who hasn't played against, Orcs army or Goths before, and suddenly you're deploying on the line and the Orcs are on you on turn 1, it doesn't matter how great their army was, you're still Orcs hitting them on turn 1. That's the kind of familiarity you need to know when to do these things and how to get them done.
100% on that. I cannot stress that being familiar with things, knowing all your stuff gives you the full asset of the full command of your assets to be able to figure out what I'm going to do against people. I mean, I've been able to pull so many games out just because I knew what my options were. So that's just a huge thing on that. So you ready for some recap on this?
Oh yeah.
Do you want to do the recap? I'll let you do the recap.
Sure, man.
I'll let you do it. I'll let you recap it up.
Okay. So for everybody's watching, this is it. So preparation. 1, you got to know what you're doing. You got to know how you're scoring. You got to know how your units work, how your combos work, and how your rules are going to interact with your opponent's army. That is step 1. Step 2, you have to know, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How are we going to make our units line up? Are you going to be particularly strong in one area and knowingly weak in others? Or are you going to try to shore it up? 3, once you've prepared, you've got all the information, and you know what's strong, what's weak, you need to make a plan based around that, not based around, other random erroneous things. You need to know what your units are doing in the matchup and how they're going to do it. Once you've got all that down, you need to actually practice doing that. Just showing up and putting your units in the wrong spot is not going to win you games. You need to communicate with your opponent. You need to say, hey, this is my intention of what I want to accomplish. Practice talking about that. Practice putting it on the board. And don't be afraid to be efficient with your time when you're practicing. We all have lives. Warhammer is fun and awesome, but it cannot dominate your entire day. You need to get very good at saying, this is what matters, this is what doesn't, moving on with your life. That's part of 5. You need to make adjustments. You need to be flexible. You need to be comfortable with what's going on in your army and in the matchup. You need to be familiar with what you're doing, and you need to have the mindset of, how do I win from this juncture? Not just saying, Eldar OP, I'm not going to win, and giving up.
That drives me crazy, by the way. Guys, gals, focus. There's in 10th edition, I can't tell you how much of an ability to come back there possibly is. There's so easy to score points. Just keep grinding out your secondaries, grabbing a primary when you can. There's dice are dice. Also, they might have, you get those stars aligned, they have a shit turn of rolling ones, and they drew 2 secondaries they can't score. All of a sudden, you get a 10, they get a 0, you're starting to grind back. Give yourself a chance to win at all times. You're not going to win every game. There's a ton of games where bad things are going to happen. Keep your cool, go get a drink, come back, chill out, look back at the board and go, how do I still win? The thing of, how do I win from here? But give yourself the chance, even if it's a small chance, but give yourself that chance to have an opportunity to win that game. Basically, taking no swings whatsoever isn't going to get you on base. You know what I mean? You're not going to win if you don't at least give yourself the opportunity to win. Just grind it out. You're playing with toy soldiers at the end. You know what I mean? Shit happens. Rock and roll from there and see what we can do. You know what I mean? It's such a big deal on that.
Yeah, way too often in even my games with people, they're just saying, oh, I can't win anymore. And I'm sitting here thinking, all right, if they know to do this and this, I'm going to be in a rough spot. But oftentimes, your mentality just drags you down, and they could be a great player and just not see that this one little thing might work out for them. Is it a high chance? No, but you're not just giving up because the game's not going your way, or Brad has rolled 8 6s on his miracle die and is going to devastating wound your entire army down, which absolutely happened to me. You still just got to play through it. You got to be, you got to have that mindset locked in of, how do I win from here? How do I get the most points from this position? Not just, well, Eldar has all 6s. Guess we're packing up early today, boys.
What? So the thing is, again, give yourself a chance. Also, where's my super chat button? I'm just looking to see where it has gone. That makes me sad. But you know what? I'm looking at a list.
Yeah, so this is what we would suggest as the sample list for you to try. This is not I cannot stress this enough. If you just take this list and put it on the table and try to play it, you're probably not going to win your first game, unless you're a 1,000 Suns expert. If you're a 1,000 Suns expert, you do you. But even then, you're going to have little pieces where you're like, this doesn't mesh with what I want to be doing. And you might change it. And when you make those changes, when you make those adjustments, have what we're saying here in mind. Go back and look through this video. What do you want this unit that you're adding to do? Seriously, what do you want it to do for you that isn't already being done? I've got 1995 points in here. If you're just like, I cannot stand for that not to say 2000, make changes. That's okay. But have a plan.
Except for don't change the Changeling, because he's awesome.
The Changeling and Magnus, please do not take Magnus and the Changeling out of your list. If I have one thing where I'm just like, start with these two, Magnus and the Changeling, then proceed to make your list. Please.
I love that. I do love the earlier. I have this local named Michael. He is super toxic at games. How do I deal with this? He won't let me take his captains as slaves so my Jakar win.
He's just no fun. I mean, that's all I got to say to that. He's just no fun.
Loving things, living large, loving life. And again, remember always, you're playing with toy soldiers. Always be happy that you're playing with toy soldiers. The option is not playing with toy soldiers, and that sucks. So, but besides that, I still need to figure out my super chat button. What is happening here? Get my chi together. So, Sean, we're going to be doing some of this. What is the plan for the people watching?
Well, the plan is if people like this sort of content and you like this kind of informal style that we're doing, where we have a little bit of organization, but also just pulling back the curtain a little bit of how would Brad and I, how would Mr. Crawley deal with kind of the meta and the thing that's going on, the things that we think about. Then our next plan would be to do Chaos Demons, and it would be to say, hey, how do we deal with it as Chaos Demons? What do we take? Now that we kind of have the basis down of like this is the structure, we're just going to jump right into it with how are we preparing as Chaos Demons? What are the strengths and weaknesses? So these are going to get a lot quicker, I guess I would say.
Also, yes. So we're going to put out a recorded version of some of these, and we're going to put them out, and we're also going to put out the live. So we're going to try to go live on Tuesdays and talk about this. We might actually take some votes on what we should do. So that is what's happening in the future for us. So be ready for more awesome content. And when I say awesome, I mean mainly, being tall, having the best hair in 40K, all those things that I like to do. So also, can we get how do I get to your channel, Sean? Because the same things are going to be hosted there.
That's right. I have Dice with Rice. We do this sort of thing in more broader terms. If you have a faction that you really want to just start playing 40K with right away, you can go check out my faction videos. We're going to be doing them on every faction. And what I do is I give you a list that I am very confident will not be nerfed so that you can, buy the models, assemble them, paint them, play with them, learn with them before GW just says, actually, your faction doesn't exist anymore. Or actually, you need to buy 15 more things. If you don't like doing that, check out some of my lists. They are specifically tailored to people who are trying to learn and get better. And there is a fun, awesome list, and there is a more competitive focus list. So there's something for everybody there if you want to check out. Just Dice with Rice 40K.
Love and life. Can do. Everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. This will be a recurring segment, so we will be there soon. And until then, give them the Queen's Wave. We're out of here.